All right, what's going on, everyone? This is Aiden Wood Mix and Mastering here, and today I'm here to dive into a pretty quick tip just about mixing. And this is a pretty general mixing tip. And I know I've talked about mixing a lot, and I will continue to do that because that's what this channel is all about, mixing and mastering. But this is one way I like to think about mixing when I'm done with my levels, which I've mentioned before is by far and away the most important part of mixing, is to first get your levels right. This is the next thing I'm looking at though, and this is probably, let's say levels is 70% of mixing. This is probably the next 20%. And what that is using EQs. Now, the way I use EQs is I like to think about it where I've talked about this in other videos about making space for things. The way I use EQ is I'm making room for things in the frequency spectrum. Now, this is something that's really important when it comes to mixing, and we've talked about other ways to do this, like with frequencies. I've used the wave spacer one before, that plugin over there, and that's more of like a dynamic EQ thing, but it's not quite as accessible, not as many people use that. So I'm going to go through today a way that I like to do EQ mixing, making room for things, just using the stock Ableton EQs. The first thing you're going to look for is you're going to think about when things are playing at the same time. Now, quickly, I'll just show you guys what my synths are sounding like in the song that I'm working on. So just something like this. I've actually got a vocal in here. Let me get that out. Go over here. And so you can hear those all sound like they're sort of in different frequency spectrums, which is good. But the reason why I don't have to worry about these synths here is because they're playing at different times. There's not any clashing that's going to go on. So even if there is synths taking up the same frequency space, that's okay because we are making sure that we've given space with time instead of frequencies. So we don't have to worry about the frequencies clashing here. These are all kind of concepts that we think about when we're mixing. We use time to mix, we use frequency, we use space. So these are all different ways we talk about mixing. But what I will look at here is how my synths clash with my bass line. And so what I'm going to look for and listen for is I'm going to listen for any parts of my low end or my synths that are playing at the same time that might be clashing frequency wise. And I think I have a pretty subby bass in this song, so there might not even have to be any mixing as the synths relate to the low end for this case, but I want these examples and these ideas to be cemented into your brain because this is how we should be doing mixing when we're talking about using EQs. So let's listen here to our synths and our bass line together. Okay, so what I'm going to do is look at my bass line here, and I'm going to just take a look at it in an EQ8. It does sound pretty subby, but we can see, look, there's frequencies that are going up to the 1K mark. So there's definitely probably areas, in the more concentrated low mids that might be clashing with some of these synths. So let's go take a look at our synths. You can see I really haven't even mixed and mastered the song yet. There's no processing on a bunch of channels, but let's just listen here. So we'll start with this first one. And what's great about this sound is this is actually playing that call and response to my bass line. So when we think about the thing like time again, we don't have to worry about these two elements clashing, even if there is some of the same frequencies, because if we listen, the synth takes up the space when the bass line isn't playing. So there's not going to be any clash there. These are call and response techniques that are very common in sort of house music songs, but also in pretty much any sort of genre. So this is something I'm not going to have to worry about, this specific synth, but let's listen to our other synths here. So yeah, so this is like our main sort of chugging along synth here. It's almost certainly going to be that there is first off some low end information, like this definitely needs a cut, but also some dominant information in the low mids. So let's listen here. So we can see there's lots of information going on between like the 100 to 300, 400. So let's just do a little bit of a dip here. We can see that and we can really listen. Like it's a hard balance between using your ears and using techniques and visual reliance, because we want to trust our ears because that's the number one thing. And if we keep everything to some sort of formula or technique, we're not going to have any soul. We're not going to have any uniqueness in our songs. But I do think it's important sometimes when we are mixing, there's probably going to be, one or two things that you don't actually hear. And then when you make a change using visual reliance, that you'll actually notice a big audible difference. So this is something I like to do starting with my ears and seeing if there is clashing, but I will also usually do a second check using visual things and use that sort of to help me do my mix. So let's do a little dip in the 100 to 400 here. So I kind of find like that's killing a bit of it. So I wonder if we can just do a little dip. So we can listen before and after. So is that our processing? Let's listen in some context here. We want to make sure we're not killing the character of the sound. So let's listen. Yeah, so I think that's doing a bit too much here. Let's bring it up a bit. Maybe look to bring up some other parts of the sound. Bit. So this EQ might look a little insane, but what we're doing is we're working and mixing our synth that's playing at the same time as our bass line around that bass line. And that is going to make it sound very clear. It's not going to sound like there's maybe some one muffled element playing at the same time. It's going to be two very clear, distinct, different sounds. And so you can see I brought out the highs. There's nothing playing in the bass line there. That's going to really help that sound shine because there's nothing interfering with it. So that is the logic I was using there. That's why, we have these visual tools, but if it doesn't look pretty after, don't worry about that. That doesn't matter at all. Use your ears when you're EQing to notice the difference and see what you like. And that way you will notice a big difference in any clashing between your sounds and your overall mix. So let's listen to one more synth here. I think that's playing. I just want to check if it's playing right before. It actually is playing right at. And this sounds very, very bright, so I'm not too worried about this interfering, but let's maybe take out any low information. Yeah. Just do a little dip here. And that sounds pretty good still, That's not taking the character out, I don't believe. Let's listen in context. Great. So that has its own space. And now let's listen to our last synth here. So that's kind of playing on an off note. Just make sure we're not. Yeah, so that's gonna play right in that spot. So this is a pretty unique scenario where you have a synth that is very concentrated in the low mids. And when you have a bass line that's also in the low mids, you really got to think about how these things play together. So this might be something that you saturate, because what we can do is we can add some upper harmonics. I know I'm mostly focusing on EQing in this video, but this is a good example as well. We're going to add a saturator here. I'm going to go a little bit to the low mids. I'm just going to add, so we can see, add some information in that, like 1 to 2K. So we just leave that on there. And I'm going to do just the tiniest dip. You can even bring this out a bit with the EQ, just to give it the space it needs to breathe. We can listen here. Yeah, so now that's very loud. So we can do a little gain test after. Make sure when you're EQing, you don't want the gain to just go up, because that'll just make it sound better. That's what our ears always believe sounds better. Do a little bit of gain staging after, and just use your ears so you can listen here. So that's sounding perfect to me. And yeah, guys, that's more or less what I'm trying to go through here, is when we're using and making EQs a big part of our mix, which it should be, and it's going to get you very far in your mix once you're done leveling. Think about how these things relate to each other, and think about it as drawing. I think that's a really good way to think about it, is you're sort of creating these shapes, and you want the shapes to blend a little bit over the lines, but you want to make sure you understand where the shapes start and end, and that way you're going to make sure everything can fit in the right frequency space as they relate to one another, because we're making a song, things will play at the same time at certain points. And when they do, we want to make sure that they still have an audible difference and we can hear the space that they have, so that we can have the best listening experience possible, essentially. So yeah, guys, this has been Inwood Mix and Mastering. Thank you for listening to this one. This is a very important mix tip, so hopefully you guys can use this in your next song for your clients or for your next own record, whatever it is. But yeah, if you guys enjoy this one, please leave a like. If you have any questions, please feel free to drop a comment. I'll be happy to get to that as soon as I can. And yeah, I guess I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.